Cloud. So excited to welcome Susan Diamond here on talking about a topic that I'm sure is exciting and can also intimidate the crap out of you. So that's why I think when I posted on in the Connect for Women group, I said, if you love money talk, this talk's for you. And if it is a really scary topic, then this talk is for you. And it seems only fitting that Susan's last name would be Diamond, that she would be talking about conquering your money mindset. I found that very ironic, and it made me even that much more excited for today's presentation. So I'm just going to do a little intro of Sue, and then I will pass it over. So Susan Diamond, founder of Her Finance Club, is on a mission to socialize the idea that it's okay for women to talk about money because knowledge is power. And when that knowledge helps you become more independent, it translates to empowerment. Her holistic approach to financial planning includes helping women expand their money mindset and confidence around their finances so that they can reduce stress, release the shame, take control, and unleash and balance their financial power. Ooh, I love that. She has a master's degree in social work from Fordham University and was certified by the Center for Financial Social Work as a financial coach, an approved program by the National Association of Social Workers, which is where she learned personal finance goes way beyond the dollars, cents, and budgets of traditional money management. Susan, I will pass it over to you, and thank you again for being with us.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to present to everybody. I love talking about your money mindset and your money beliefs. So thanks for joining us today, everybody. So I always like to kind of start out with, the meaning of money, the concept behind it, because when I ask, what's the simple answer to the meaning of money? It's just, it's an exchange, right? That we use to buy goods and services. But in spite of that answer, money is a matter of belief and behaviors that are fraught with emotions, such as shame, fear, pride, control, and so much more. And often, I mean, this is one of the reasons I've worked in the finance world. People will be like, oh my goodness, that's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it? You're a social worker and you work in finance, but the people's attitudes and emotions to money, because it's so much more than currency, really drove my interest there. So the meaning of money is a mindset matter because it revolves around our beliefs and our behaviors. And conquering your money mindset and believing that you can is really a critical piece of the puzzle when it comes to financial success. So I'm just trying to move to the next slide here. There we go. I had to tap it a little extra hard. So as Julie mentioned, I'm the founder of the Her Finance Club. And prior to that, I worked as the director of women's wealth of philanthropy at the PowHERHour Group, which was a US financial and estate planning firm where we helped women build and preserve their wealth, and also specialized in some creative solutions when it came to redirecting your money from Uncle Sam to your favorite charity. So I'm really passionate about women's economic empowerment. And I always like to share in terms of, did you know that 85% of women are the CFOs of their family households? And they're making, most day-to-day purchases and budgeting decisions, but they still feel uncomfortable discussing financial matters. Did you know that more women than men say money is their number one source of stress? The American Psychological Association also indicates that money is the number one source of stress for women. So can you relate to that? Is that something you relate to? And did you know that the area where women fall behind the most when it comes to money literacy is knowledge and confidence when it comes to maximizing earnings and investment power? So imagine if there was a way to move past, the money taboo, dial down your financial anxiety and achieve greater financial success. Well, I'm here to tell you there is. You don't have to imagine it, because it's about understanding your money mindset, your money beliefs, your style. So one of the reasons that I had founded the Her Finance Club after leaving the financial industry was that I was seeing real life impacts of these statistics I just mentioned on the women around me. And no one was really talking about this. And worse than that, many women were afraid to. They were afraid to talk to each other about money. They were afraid to ask questions about financial products they didn't understand, and in some instances felt ashamed or embarrassed about their finances and wished they had learned more about money when they were younger. I can't tell you how many women that I would come into contact with that would say to me, oh, I need to be in a much better place before I do any actual planning. And my response to that always was, well, that's kind of like saying I'll join the gym when I'm in better physical shape. I mean, there's always a time to start. So for me, the key here is the more you talk about money, the more you can open doors for yourself and for others to do the same. And men feel very comfortable chatting about money. They'll chat about their business investments, they'll chat about salaries. But again, for women, there's this taboo around us. We don't sit in our circles and talk openly. We'll talk about everything else, but we don't talk openly about, investments. Or does anybody, just out of curiosity, I'm going to throw a question out there, a rhetorical question. Think of your 5 closest friends. And then as you think about who they are, which one of them, or do any of them, inspire you when it comes to building wealth? Do you chat about investments? Do you ever talk about your dreams? So I'm just curious, put that in, then we'll look at it afterwards. If you do have discussions with close friends about this topic. But it all starts with, as I'd said before, it starts with your money mindset, right? So before I get started, for the purposes of this discussion, here's my little disclaimer. So this is totally financial education here today. I'm not able to give any individual personal financial, tax, or legal advice. So just to throw that out there, because I'm still tied under FINRA. So unfortunately, I can't do that. But we can talk about general stuff. So all right. So what are the meat and potatoes when it comes to talking about the money mindset? Well, it's your personality, it's your style, it's your beliefs. It's about how you think about money. It's about how you react to money, and it's how you communicate about money. So your beliefs will cause you to take action or not, which will lead to the results that you have with money. So, for example, do you spend every penny that you make? Do you have credit card debt? Do you have an ample emergency fund? Do you put 10% of your income away for investments? So the mindset is going to affect how you manage your money and your emotional connection to it. And it's going to drive, how we make those key financial decisions every day. But one of the things I did want to bring up, and especially because of 2020, as I'd mentioned before, finances are our number one source of stress, especially for women. And what we have to heighten our awareness to is that stress does tend to pull us back in terms of our negative self-talk. And it has a tendency to make us start looking back. And I did the same thing, probably when we got to May, knowing that COVID, my office is actually in New York City, or the team I worked with is still closed. But, were you starting to think, oh my God, I wish I'd paid that credit card off when I started thinking about it 6 months ago, or if I'd started saving for my emergency fund last year, I'd be okay now. And then kind of, when we fast forward to our current situation, some of us are still feeling stressed because and overwhelmed. I know a lot of women are still unemployed because we know COVID hit women harder, just based on the industries that were hit. Some people are still furloughed, and some people are making, thinking about job changes based on what's been happening. So what we have to look at is any uncertainty with the economy and job security can cause us stress because money provides safety to us, right? So when we live in fear, we make bad decisions, and some of us will trigger what you may be familiar with, our fear-based response, causing stress and anxiety. So when this happens, our rational minds kind of get pushed aside and our emotions tend to predominate. So it's not like we can think our way out of anxiety, because our thoughts tend to, feed the anxiety. And it's easy for our mind to lead us from being fearful about the possibility of losing our job to very quickly thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do if I can't pay my mortgage? And if I can't pay my mortgage, am I going to be homeless? And so we can go from soup to nuts, almost certain death in a matter of seconds if we let our brain run away with us in those circumstances. So we really have to think about, controlling our thoughts more, because we have a tendency not to do that and not let them run away with us. And knowing how and where this anxiety shows up in our body can also alert us to stress. So I don't know if anybody's experienced this. Sometimes, when you are looking at your checkbook, does it cause your heart to race, or do you feel nauseous? So when you think about some of the behaviors that you may have tied to your finances, whether you're comparing your financial situation to that of others, how does that make you feel? Or where in your body do you feel this? Because sometimes it could be a headache, it could be a stomach ache. So I think, when we are in touch with ourselves and we begin to see our reactions for what they are because it's fear-based and the result of our past relationship with money, then we can kind of begin to accept the feelings in our body and recognize that they're not permanent and that they will pass. So I think that's key, because for me, when I talk about finances, health is wealth. For women think and experience money differently. Money typically is a tool for us to achieve what's important and what we value most. It's not about wealth, isn't necessarily about how much money we have. It's about what can we achieve that we value most, or what's most important. So I don't have the chat up, but if a question comes up, Julie, that you think warrants as a discussion here and now, would you let me know? Otherwise, I'll just plug along here. So how to discover and rewrite my money story to nourish my individual and collective well-being. So our beliefs and mindset, as I'd mentioned, create, the financial behavior that we have, which stems from our money story. And our money messages are what we received when we were growing up, and they could be both verbal and non-verbal. And those experiences those experiences form our money story, which is typically formed by the time we're 8 or 9 years of age. So some of the responses I generally hear when people were growing up, they'll heighten their awareness to the fact, they said, oh yeah, I realized my family, lived paycheck to paycheck, or when bills came in, I could hear my parents arguing and doors would be slammed, etc. Or from people who were very privileged to afford whatever they wanted and they never had to worry about money. Or again, going back to, well, nobody in our household ever talked about money because, I think it was considered a taboo, but no one ever really talked about it. So I don't talk about it today. So when we kind of begin to observe and recognize some of, our beliefs and behaviors that they're tied to, what we need to take a look at is, is this the story I want to be telling myself? Is the results that you're having with your money empowering you or disempowering you? And I think, the inquiry, into this can be quite liberating. And it is a fact that the number one path, to freedom is kind of the empowerment and taking a look and recognizing, where you need to make changes, because it's kind of like, if we don't understand why we have certain behaviors and why we're having negative results with our money, then we're not going to be able to move forward and have financial success. And when I talk about financial success, that can mean many different things to many people. I mean, for me, financial freedom is, you're at a point where you are in a position to make choices and do things that you want to do because you have the tool, the money to be able to do that. Financial freedom, financial success could be, okay, I've got to pay off my student loan debt, or I've got to save X amount of dollars and then I can buy my first house. So we're all in a different place when it comes to what financial success means to us. But again, understanding your feelings about money and, how that ties into past experiences and emotions will help you move forward. I will at the end just put in the chat, I do have a do-it-yourself money story guide that can help you take a look at, because as I've mentioned, a lot of this is we do unconsciously, that you can start to answer some questions and heighten your awareness to that, so it'll help you move forward. So I'll show the link to that before we finish here today. So I often hear women talk about, and that this may be applicable to you, maybe your story gave you all the tools that you need to be successful, with your finances, or perhaps it gave you some negative perceptions that have stunted your financial success. And what I mean by that, do you find yourself feeling or thinking you're reluctant to talk about finances because of it being a taboo subject? Do you sometimes feel lost when it comes to personal finance? Do you feel shame around where you are in your money life, because whether you're still paying off loans or living paycheck to paycheck or spending more, than your lifestyle and income can support? Do you worry that talking about money will make you vulnerable? I've heard that in a lot of instances. And do you worry that talking about money will make someone feel bad? Again, I've heard women say, well, I talk with one friend about it because we're both kind of on par in terms of our earning power, because we're in similar positions, but we don't really talk to our other friends about it because, that they don't earn the same amount of money. So steering away from that. So either way, it's important for us to understand, how this is going to affect us right now, and determine if we need to change our money story, because we do have the power to rewrite our story. I like to say we're the author of our own story. So once we heighten our awareness to this, determine if we want to change the results, then we can rewrite. It's not easy, but it can be done. Just a very quick example of one woman or client that I had worked with who was very successful financially, but she had so much guilt tied to spending money on herself. And she was in a position to be able to enjoy her money, but her mindset was holding her back, which stemmed from her money story. So her money story was, growing up, the scarcity value was instilled. It was always, money doesn't grow on trees, and we can't afford that, and we really need to be rigid in kind of looking at how much we're spending. So the bottom line was, she would stop asking her parents for anything because she felt guilty because she thought they couldn't afford to pay for that. So fast forward for when she was 14, she said she was in town and she discovered that her father owned the local Dairy Queen and became aware that this scarcity value that was instilled was not quite as bad as it was being portrayed. But then that was his money story, right? So we got to remember, the different generations and how that plays in as well. I mean, not to digress, but my own mum, she grew up in a rural area in Ireland, in Balik. And I always refer to her Balik behaviors because they had no money, and I don't think they had electric on the farm until the 60s. But anyway, there was no money. They made their own clothes, and they had stock, and would make cheese and bread and everything else. So fast forward, she had a career as a nurse, and I would consider my parents to be working middle class, but had a good lifestyle. But today, my mother couldn't get past that scarcity value either. So I can call her, I'll FaceTime her, and she's in her age, she's 84. And I'll call her, and it could be the middle of the summer, and she'll have a big jumper or a sweater on. And she's like, oh, it's not so warm, today. And I'm like, well, put the heat on. And she's like, I'm not putting the heat on. It's the middle of the summer. We don't spend money on heating in the middle of the summer. You just layer up. So although, I commend her for, looking at how she can save money and thinking about the environment, I mean, but this behavior now is detrimental to her health. She won't put the heat on because of some of those beliefs. So I'm just saying, we all do it. As women, sometimes we have a tendency to think we're the only one. But going back to my Dairy Queen client. So what we did with her was she had all her ducks in a row. So she had her emergency fund, and she had her short-term goals that she was putting money away for, and her long-term goals in terms of her retirement. So we had said, okay, let's create an account where it's your spending money. So you can go in there and you can just take without any guilt because everything else is taken care of. So those are just, examples that I like to share when it comes to our money story in terms of, how they can affect us negatively and positively in some instances. So just looking at the time, let me move along here. So, okay. So one of the other things is that it's what we can control, right? We worry about things and our mindset can run away with us. But, what we have to think about is we have to think about what can we control and what can't we control? Because if we can't control it, there's no sense in, kind of letting our mindset run away with us. So we know that in terms of, COVID and the market and risk volatility, we have no control over that, right? But what we do have control over is our behavior. And that in turn ties into understanding our goals and our risk tolerance. So we know in terms of COVID, if we wash our hands and we wear masks, then, that's the part that we can control, right? In terms of the economy, the outside market, the overall economy, the market can go up, it can go down, it can stay flat, and it can go sideways. And I think it's most important for us to recognize is that what we need to know is what our goals are. Hopefully we know that, right? And if we can figure that out, then what are our goals and what are your time frames? So you can control what you need to control to be successful financially. And that was one of the highlights that I saw with the PowHERHour team that I worked with in 2020. We saw that working with our clients through, I guess, the fastest bear market, we went within a space of 4 weeks, right? From a bull to a bear. And that was the fastest bear market in history. and seeing our process work, because clients knew that their money was there for them, right? And they didn't need to freak out because they knew they were okay. So they knew short term, they were already set up and they had their emergency fund. They knew they were taken care of long term. They knew that they could sit it out because they knew the time frame wasn't 6 weeks between COVID hitting us and the news of the bottom of the market. You know, their time frames were much longer in terms of building out their wealth. So really, you know, when we look at how to prepare, you know, it's crisis or future. So preparing, you know, can help us control a situation and reduce our level of stress. So let me just go. So I like to share this because this is the biggest thing, and it, you know, we all experience it, just in terms of the market, right? So there's a cycle of market emotion. So I bring this up because the only way to build financial security is by increasing assets, savings, and investments. So when we think of January in 2020, you know, everybody was, you know, probably euphoric, right? Because, you know, with many people were making money hand over fist, right? So then by March, the market had reacted to all the grim news of COVID and took, you know, investors for a bit of a roller coaster ride, which then created fear and panic. And fear and panic, as we talked about earlier, you know, it takes us out of our rational mind, and we don't make the best decisions when we're stressed and panicking. But I'm here to tell you that, you know, if you've consistently contributed to your retirement and investment accounts over the last 10 years, then you've been buying in at a higher, you know, price, right? And if clients were saying, you know, should I pull out? Then it was like, well, if you stop contributing now, that means that you get no opportunity to buy in at the lower price because stocks are on sale. So we know, you know, everything's back up and that's fine, but we have to learn to remember, you know, why is our money where it is? You know, if you've got money for the long term, then it's going to be able to ride itself out, right? Because what we know is that, I think, what was it, in the last 28 days or the last 12 months, stocks hadn't dropped more than 1%. So that's overall. So if we look at the market and we think about, you know, how long has it been around? It's been around since 1792, and it's proven that on average, US stocks have an annualized growth of anywhere between 7 and 10% over a 20-year period. So if you have the right money mindset and strategy, then you can be the successful investor, no matter what the market does, if you stick to the strategy. And understanding this is key to helping you with your financial success. And I always like to say, you know, as we transition, you know, hope is not a plan, and prayer is not a strategy. I always like to share this information because I think it's really important, because women, I think it's an oxymoron when it comes to being risk aversive. So they say in terms of investments that women tend to hold back because they're risk averse when it comes to investments. But more women go out and create their own businesses or becoming entrepreneurs, which I would think is a greater risk, but they're out looking at that. So when we think about these things, we have to, I guess, put it all in place. So if you put your money in the right place, it can grow substantially over time, right? So, and that's thanks to the power of compound interest. So I like to share this little example here. So the rule of 72 it's a simple way to determine how long an investment will take to double given a fixed annual rate of interest. So as I'd mentioned, before, typically the market over 20 years is done between 7 and 10%. So if we look at this example, you can just see, what does 2% do? Well, that's 36 years. But if we go and let's gauge based on what the market does over 20 years, so 8%, it takes 9 years to double your money. So what we need to look at is risk of market versus inflation and leaving money in the bank. This is why I bring this up. So if we're leaving money in the bank right now, it's paying less than 1% typically on a savings account. And yes, we need money for our emergency fund, but we don't need to have all our money in savings, because what happens is inflation is growing faster than the rate of your money, right? And so then your money then becomes, it's actually worth less if we think about it. So here's an example of what I mean by that when we look at a trajectory. Okay, so if we look here at Emily puts $200 per month into a retirement account, and it's at a 6% rate, and she starts at 25. And then Dave starts saving the same amount, but he does it at 35. So he does it 10 years after Emily. So what's the difference between someone who starts at 25 versus someone who starts at 35? Well, both of them continued to add $200 each month until they both retired at 65. And by the time they were 65, Emily had contributed 96,000 and David contributed 72,000. And because Emily had started saving 10 years earlier, she had put in about 33% more money into her account than David put in. But by the time they both get to retire, Emily has almost twice as much money as Dave. Emily has 402,000 and change, and Dave has 203. So that extra 10 years of compounding returns has made Emily's situation far better than Dave's when they are 65. So regardless of interest rate savings, early allows time for the money to grow. Waiting too late, it's never too late to start. I mean, don't get me wrong there, but waiting too late to start funding retirement can become costly because you have to start putting more money away. So I like to also share, I like to refer to them as the financial success buckets. I think it makes it easier when we organize our financial life. Using the buckets for me is the easiest. It helps, it allows us to think about money in different ways, right? And we can explain, so you can, I guess the PowerPoint slide is self-explanatory in terms of focus, flexibility, and future. So as I'd mentioned before, the only way to build financial security is by increasing your assets and savings and investments. So when we look at bucket 1, 1 to 5 years, this is the unplanned bucket, unplanned expense bucket. So it can be referred to as the emergency fund. I think before COVID, we would typically say, 3 to 6 months. But I think if COVID has taught us anything, 6 to 9 months is a better target when it comes to an emergency fund. So the other thing that this can be used for is money held in this bucket should be used for anything that can't be paid for out of cash flow, right? That will happen in the next 6 to 12 months. So examples of that could be, a new boiler or your car breaks down. So then we have, it can, dream bucket. So it can also be the dream bucket as well. And basically anything that you're saving for that you can't pay for out of your normal cash flow that has like at least a 1-year time horizon or longer. So that's also what ties into that. So bucket 2, that's about combating inflation, right? So if you're fortunate enough to have, your emergency fund, your 6 to 9 months of savings put away, and you're matching your employer's retirement contribution, if you work for an employer, then it's time to start looking at other investings. And I always say, try and match with your employer, because that's free money. So with interest rates still well below inflation, every dollar that you have, as I've mentioned, in a standard checking or savings account kind of loses its purchasing power over time, because, if inflation is rising between 2 and 3% annually, and you're only earning, 1% or a little more, then you're losing value on your money each year. So often, inflation will mean that the money you save in the bucket, this bucket, will, if it's not being saved in this bucket, would lose value over time. So, I look at this as your family needs to grow and your daily living expenses may increase. The solution is to create the second bucket, one in which you can, have savings to invest in higher risk funds that still produce income, but these investments should provide some type of return on your income, like, stocks and mutual funds that pay a regular dividend. And then bucket number 3, well, that's, focused on your retirement. So any funds that have been highlighted specifically to provide income when you retire, which, 401ks, 403bs, and your IRAs, your simple IRAs. Sorry. So let me just move along here quickly, because I see that we're coming close to the hour end. So as I'd mentioned earlier, typically for women, money is a tool for us to achieve what's important to us. And our financial circumstances, can impact every area of our life. When it comes to our income, this is the foundation of our financial situation. So our spending determines whether or not we have debt or we have money to save and invest, right? So if you don't have debt, you should feel good about your ability not to spend more than you earn. But on the other hand, not having debt doesn't necessarily equate to being in control of your money or your financial future. And if you are not saving and investing, you're not building that financial stability. And, the only way that we can build that financial security is by increasing those assets. And I always like to say, it's not about what you make, it's about what you keep. It's about understanding, do I have the ability with what I'm making to take care of my basic needs? And if not, what adjustments do I need to make when it comes to that, right? So basic money management, begins with understanding our spending habits and the patterns, which ties back to our money beliefs. And, as I'd mentioned before, money, it's that mechanism to accomplish what matters most to us. So if you're saving for a car, if you're saving to pay down your debt, if you're saving for that emergency day fund, it will include having to create those short and long-term goals, as I referenced in regards to the buckets, to make it easier for you to achieve that. And again, planning, it's going to bring clarity and help reduce that stress and build confidence for you. So once we understand, our spending and our debt and can get a handle on that, then we can look at our savings and our emergency funds. And once we have that under control, then we can start to look at the investment side, which will help us grow our money and make our money work as hard, as we do to get it. So with that being said, I just wanted to, whoops. Oh, sorry about that. Maybe I can stop the share. So I know it's a lot of information to try and take in a short span of time. So I apologize if I was talking very fast while I was going through this. I know, uh, as we'd mentioned earlier, finances for some, it's a tough subject for us to start talking openly about. But does anybody have any questions?
I have a very specific and probably very tactical question, and that I'm sure you can answer very quickly. You were talking about different types of investments. You were like, your 401ks and your 403bs and your IRAs. And I'm like, what the heck is a 403b? And am I supposed to be doing something with that? I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, those are typically tied with your employer. So typically the 403b has a tendency to fall within the education industry.
Got it.
So these are opportunities just in terms of the qualified plans. So I don't know if you needed information on that, Julie, in terms of it being a qualified plan.
No, I just wanted to know if that was another thing that I should be investing in, because I've always had a 401k, but the 403b was brand new. So that makes sense. Thank you.
Right. And you can, talking to the human resource department with your employer, they should be able to share with you or refer you to whoever they work with. So you can get more detailed information in terms of the types of investments that you can make with the plans that they offer.
Thank you.
So I'm going to share in the chat. Sorry, I just had to copy the link. And this is the link to the do-it-yourself money story guide that I had mentioned earlier. And I think you'll find it valuable. And I recommend that you do this if you have a partner, that you do it with your partner, because with your money stories are unique to all of us as individuals. None of us have the same money story. So then when we're trying to figure out our own money story, and then we have a partner in the mix who has a different money story, then, it becomes even more challenging. So a quick example. So my husband has a very different money story to me. And when we go, although we haven't really been away for a year, but when we would go abroad, he would always be spending money on what I would consider to be knickknacks and a waste of money. But, he'd come back to the hotel every night with a whole slew of things. So I thought, okay, I don't want to go into this aggressively saying what I think, I think that's a load of rubbish and you're wasting money. It's like, okay, he's got to be allowed to do his own thing as well. So what I had said was, I said, okay, I think we should allocate a budget for just, what are we going to spend on knickknacks and things of that nature? Because number one, we have to get them back as well, on the plane and the weight with the luggage and everything. So I found that, he didn't spend as much and I didn't get as annoyed because he would then have this budget and, go get the things he liked, but he knew, oh, that works for me. But on the other side of that, what I like to do is I think, when we think about, spending money and saving, and I'm going to have a stylist in a couple of weeks. We were talking, I'm going to be doing a podcast with her from New York City, and we were laughing and talking about stuff. And I said, oh my God, I love, again, from my mother, that scarcity value. I used to get the same thing, what am I for, please, bank? And there's no money tree at the end of the garden. You need to, really, watch what you're spending. And so I got my first job at 13 because I wanted to be able to buy my own clothes. I didn't want to be told, oh no, that's too expensive, you can't have that, or this coat's more practical. So I'm like, right, I'm going to take control of this. I'll go get, so I've got a job in a bed and breakfast and made beds at the weekend so I could earn my own money, so I could do that. But I also like to go to thrift shops. I love, because I'm all about, and I guess this stems from my money beliefs, a bargain and a savings. So, I'll allocate myself a certain amount of money to go in. I'll say, all right, I'm going to take $50 and that's it. I can't spend more than that. And so sometimes I always say, for savings, automating is great because kind of out of sight, out of mind, you don't miss it. But really, tracking your money, sometimes it's good to physically have money because you can take better control of it that way as well. So that's, I hope this was helpful for everybody.
I have a question just on a theoretical, hopefully reality, but theoretical question. I'm currently unemployed and I'm working through spending my rainy day fund, which is stressful in and of itself, but there's still plenty left, thank goodness.
Right.
When I then become employed, if the company has a 401k and a 401k match, do you suggest immediately going into the 401k for the match as soon as possible, or taking that money and rebuilding the rainy day fund, or trying to do both?
I would try and do both, because with the match, so if you think about it, I mean, most employed, they go anywhere from 3 to 8% these days. And that's free. So we talked about the compound interest. So the sooner it's going in, the better. Right. But it's free money. So I always say, like, sometimes I'll talk to people and they'll be like, oh, well, my company's 8%, but I'm putting in 15%. And it's like, well, you know what? Definitely take the free money, but there may be other options based on where you are. If that person was still trying to build their emergency, I'd be like, no, build your emergency fund, but make sure you get the match first. But yeah, because it's free money and you get to take that with you when you leave. Right. So okay. I'm all about the free money.
Me too. I totally get it.
So does anybody have any other questions?
Well, this has been great. It's really awesome. I am also unemployed, and so I'm having trouble just even finding a lot of this relevant to me, because I mean, I'm at 2 years, I'm over 2 years unemployed, so I am almost through all of my cash savings. Now, I haven't touched my 401k or my like very small IRA, but I'm looking at having to possibly do that soon. If without sharing too much detail, like thanks to the US government and COVID, I don't have to pay my mortgage, but the minute that comes back online, right. So it's hard for me to wrap my brain around. There's nothing I can do other than, try to keep the spending from like touching that 401k and IRA money, right. And just making sure that that 401k and that what little IRA I have is working the best that it can. But I can't even, then it gives me a heart attack of like, how am I going to build that back up? Knock on wood, if I do get a job. Right. So I don't know if you have any, I mean, I don't know if there's any way to think about it other than.
Right. Well, I mean, you can only take one step at a time, right? I mean, sometimes, and that's where we're our own worst enemy. We're looking and thinking about the big picture, and yeah, we need to have a vision, to guide us, but those small steps along the way is where we focus on. And like I said at the beginning, we can only focus on what we can control, right? So, it's been 2020 was awful. It's put people in situations that they never thought they would be in. So I think, from your perspective right now, as you say, it's like focusing on your spending. Where are you spending money? Are there ways that, you can look at saving there? And are there options for passive income opportunities out there? Is there something I could be doing, in the interim while I'm searching for my ideal job? I know you can Google, and I'm not sure what you do, Nicole, or if you have an interest in passive income, but it's really, it's looking at, is there something that I can do temporarily? And we know right now, different levels of customer service are a big thing because everything's being done online. And I actually, it was funny, just on a side note, and I was looking at this for I thought it would do two things. I came across this makeup brand that I really, really liked, and they have this whole network marketing. And I thought, well, if I'm buying it and I really enjoy it, and it makes me feel good when I'm coming on presentations, it gives me more confidence, why not sell it as well? And then I have a little extra income that I can put towards something that, I have a goal for. So I don't know if there's anything out there. I mean, you can certainly Google passive incomes for women right now, and there might be something out there that, can bring in a little bit of money while you're looking.
I do a little freelance, but I'm not familiar with that term, passive income. Like what category of that? Is that sort of side hustles, kind of like?
Yes. Yeah. Side hustle. So, and I think with COVID as well, I've seen a lot of women that did have side hustles transition over to make that full time because of how they were impacted, and especially women with younger kids, because they were trying to deal with the education component and they needed a lot more flexibility in terms of kind of being at home, or I should say, I don't like to say home mum, I like to say working mum at home, because you're not just at home, right?
Right.
We do a million other things. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I think, again, is there other opportunities for passive income streams? What can you save? And then, looking at opportunities for how you can best find a job. Are you on LinkedIn? Do you have any mentors or connectors out there? I mean, certainly groups like this are helpful.
This group's been awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and just reaching out and letting people know, hey, I'm looking for work in this field. Who do you know? In the past, when I've looked at stuff, I've gone on LinkedIn and done searches for the industries, that I might want to connect with, and then I'll reach out to the person that's in the industry to make a connection. And I think, again, as women, because we've been hit so much harder by COVID, that we like to be a part of a tribe and a community, and we are supportive. We always want to help other women, if they're in need. So I think, if you feel comfortable reaching out on LinkedIn and looking at who has a connection, who might be in an industry that you like, that you'll find, it's just, hey, would love to connect. Well, what's important in terms of, drive for employees in this, or just ask them, would they be a mentor?
Yeah, and that's exactly what this group is all about. So thank you so much, Susan, for your time. Thanks everyone for your participation. I'm going to stop the